and players mobbing.
But Michael Jordan is not only the best basketball player, but he's the most exciting basketball player to ever play.
Tatum fires away, pumps it in, 51 for Jason Tatum.
The Big Three NBA podcast is powered by PrizePicks and the Game Time app. Hello, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Big Three NBA podcast. I am Sherrod Blakely, joined by Keith Pompey, the award-winning Keith Pompey of Philadelphia News, covers of Sixers, does a great job, just killing it as always on the beat. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm happy to be on your podcast.
Glad to be here. Glad to have you here for sure. Now, the one thing about Keith, in addition to being an amazing reporter and writer, the one thing Keith is very familiar with is covering a team where your franchise player is doing what you and me and most fans do, which is watching the game, which is not what they should be doing. The Celtics are going through that with Jason Tatum. Well, we know that the Achilles injury is going to keep him out most, if not all, of the season. Keith has gone through that many, many times with Joel Embiid. And Keith, just from a reporting standpoint, what changes when you know the best player in a franchise is going to be out for an extended period of time, the way Tatum is, and obviously Joel has been in the past?
I think the number thing that changes is the expectations, right? Also how you cover it. But from a standpoint, I'm looking at the Celtics and comparing them to the Sixers. And, this basically, to me, goes back to when Ben Simmons was at his prime playing with the Sixers. So when you look at it, you say, okay, Tatum is not going to be here, at least for the majority of this season. It's all about Jaylen Brown. So the thing is, you're going to look at him like we looked at Ben Simmons and say, how can you elevate this team? How can you, because let's face it, it's always been one of those things where people were comparing the two and everybody wanted to see how Jaylen Brown would be able to be the man, be the guy. And I think this is a pretty good opportunity for him to do that. And as a reporter, that's the one thing that you want to see and see if he can be that guy. Can he be, Batman instead of Robin, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting comparison, because when I think about Jaylen Brown and in comparison to the Ben Simmons, obviously both were very accomplished, at the points when they had that opportunity. But the difference, I think, is that JB actually wants to be that man. He wants to be Batman. Yeah. And Ben was like, yo, if I'm Robin, I'm Robin. I'm okay with that. How much does that impact the ability to meet those standards? Because obviously when the main guy is gone, someone's got to pick up the slack. And if you're not real comfortable picking up that slack, when you think about Ben Simmons, for example, how much of the struggles that they experienced without Joel had more to do with maybe Ben's approach to being the man as opposed to his actual skills to be that guy?
It's kind of weird, because if you go back and you look at the games that Joel Embiid didn't play and Ben Simmons played, Ben Simmons had like a major imprint on the game. Like, he was getting triple doubles. He was doing a lot of different things. I felt like playing with Joel, and he probably felt like it until he left, that he felt like that stunted his growth a little bit. But I think that the problem, when you look back at Ben Simmons, the problem was that he just didn't put the work in. You know what I mean? And you look at it, and it's kind of like you look at JB, and you look at what, when it was a reason why Ben Simmons went number one over him, because everybody projected that he had a higher upside. They both were extremely athletic, everything like that. Ben was bigger, stronger. But you look and you see how JB was like, forget that. I'm the guy. I'm going to be the man. And he worked on his game. Whereas I felt like Ben was just a little bit more complacent with being a highlight reel, like not being a complete player. And then you look at it and you see he had these injuries. And what happens? Your athleticism goes. But if you didn't work on your shot and you're not as athletic, then you're no longer a unicorn as a 6'10" point guard. You have to be a 6'10" power forward.
Yeah. And the thing about Ben Simmons, that's the thing. It's like where he started off, just the natural progression that most NBA players go through. Definitely you would have thought he would have been further down the road in terms of just being a legitimate, high profile, high impact, difference making, multi-time all-star, when you think about 6'10" point guards, one of the first people who comes to mind is Magic Johnson, being that tall, that long, and having that type of game. But clearly it didn't, work out how he, or I think most NBA fans, those who like or hate the Sixers, felt. But listen, man, enough about the Sixers of the past. Let's talk about the Sixers of today, man. We want this to be upbeat. The Sixers of today, interesting place. I've talked to a few scouts about this team, and the general consensus is that Philly is the wild card of all wild cards in the Eastern Conference, because they look at last season, for example, and when you lose McCain, you're able to bring in a guy like VJ Edgecombe, and if you got a healthy Joel, you got a healthy Paul George, and then you got Maxey. This is a very different team than the one that we saw kind of limp through the 24-25 season. But before we get into all that, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the this offseason for the Sixers, and just how do you think they address whatever issues, needs they had going into this year with what they were able to do in the offseason?
I don't think they really will. I will say this. In the offseason, they got taller, right? I mean, they did. They got taller. I mean, I'm just going to say, a lot of times people were saying that they got younger, but they didn't really get younger, no. Because the people that they got rid of were kind of sort of like a lot of the young stars. I mean, they're bringing back Kyle Lowry. They're bringing back Eric Gordon. Paul George was the third oldest player on the team. You have Andre Drummond, who's an older guy now. Joel's 31. But what they did is, I felt like the Sixers, they're kind of sort of in a tough spot heading into the offseason because, as much as they say they weren't trying to move Paul George, sources were telling you they weren't trying to move Paul George, but they couldn't get rid of him, right? They couldn't get off that contract. So when you look at that, they didn't really have a lot of wiggle room. So what they had to do was they had to go out there. They got Jabari Walker. They got Dom Barlow. And these are two they are two forwards. And they also got Trendon Watford. Well, the thing is, Trendon Watford got a minimum. And the other two guys who are NBA veterans are basically on two-way deals, because that's all the 76ers could afford. So when you say to yourself, and you look at other teams like Detroit, Atlanta, the New York Knicks, when you compare the role players they brought in to the 76ers, you have to say that these teams were better, and they also made more substantial upgrades than the 76ers have. So, to me, when I say they got taller, yeah, like, Paul George at 6'8", outside of the centers, he was the tallest guy there. Like, he was the tallest player on the team. So now you have 3 6'9" guys, but the question mark is, are they capable of being starter caliber players for an NBA contender? And you don't know that. Two of them, Barlow, was a two-way guy before who kept getting his contract converted, but he played on struggling teams. The same thing with Jabari Walker. Like, he wasn't a two-way, but he played on the Portland Trail Blazers. And then when we talk about Trendon Watford, he was with the Trail Blazers, and then he was also with the Brooklyn Nets. So to me, they got taller, but we have to find out if they're really going to be a good mesh, especially in a wide open Eastern Conference when the other teams made upgrades.
Yeah. And when you look at the one name that jumped out to me isn't so much the guy that's coming, but the guy that's leaving, and that's former Celtic Guerschon Yabusele. I thought he was really good. I mean, was that just simply a matter of just not having enough money to pay him, or was there some other breakdown in why he's not going to be back in Philly? Because I know a lot of people were really excited about what he was able to do last year.
It's two things. When you look at, and one of the guys who's a Boston Celtics now, what's his name? George Niang, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, George Niang. So here's the deal. It's like the Sixers have a habit of, when these guys get ready to leave, they come out and they offer them extremely low contracts. Now, they offer them okay, we want you back, but can you take the minimum? Now, the 76ers are saying they offered Guerschon Yabusele more than the minimum, but to him, it was a slap in the face, the offer that they did offer him. Now, the thing is, you can look at it like they looked at Quentin Grimes. They know that they got to get taller in the guard spot. Quentin Grimes is 6'5". He's proved to be a solid two-way player in this league. He was the star of the team at the latter stages of the season, but he's a restricted free agent. The Sixers are in cap heck, so to speak. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep as much money available so they could match anything that anyone had to offer so they can get Grimes. So when you look at it, you say to yourself, your Guerschon Yabusele became a casualty, so to speak, because the 76ers are focused on Grimes. But at the same time, when you look at the history, we're talking about George Niang. They didn't want to pay him a lot of money. There have been other players who were there that they did not want to pay, like McDaniels, like Jaylen McDaniels. His brother Jaden, plays for Minnesota. They didn't want to pay him, right? So it's just been a lot of guys where they look at you and they feel like we have most of our money tied up into the big three, so we're not going to pay as much. Now they may deny that, but that's what history says.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about, we're here with Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia News, and we're talking about just the Sixers offseason. We're talking about some of the guys they lost. Yabusele, one among them, obviously. But let's shift a little bit to some of the guys who might be coming back that people may not know about, or guys that are coming that they don't know a lot about. I'm thinking about VJ Edgecombe. For one, I'm thinking about McCain, who was on a great tear, to start the season and then got hurt. How did the Sixers find that balance between working in these guys who are clearly should be part of their future going forward, but at the same time, you still have these established OGs with Paul George and Joel Embiid? How is that mix going to work? And then we're not even talking about Maxey, who obviously is a key part of the future. How does it work for them to blend those two worlds together and be successful?
Yeah, it's great. That's a great question, because when you look at it, it's crazy because you got all these guards and it's great to get them all out there and be balanced attack with them. But you do know that the offense runs through Embiid, and then you want PG to have a starring role as well. I feel like that the 76ers are, while they're talking about our championship window is right now. That's what people think. I also think they're loading up for the future, right? Because they have a chance. Like, let's face it, Joel Embiid has been injured. We talked about that in the beginning, and he's been injured this past season. He's still not yet to come back. He's not ready to come back. Paul George, the same thing. But when you look at it, I think that right now, when you have a guy like a VJ Edgecombe, the 76ers, the word they keep using is patience. Be patient with him. You know what I mean? Like, so that tells me, like, yeah, he's going to play, but the goal is for him to be the man next year or the year after that, right? When you look at Jared McCain, as good as he was, he's listed as 6'2". He told me he might be 6'1", right? Tyrese Maxey is listed as 6'2", but Jared McCain is taller than Tyrese Maxey. So when you have things like that, you look at it and you say, okay, are these two guards good enough to be a starting combo, or tall enough to be a starting combo in the NBA in the playoffs? And you may say no. So what it is you look at McCain and you can develop him to be a solid guy, at least for now, a solid guy coming off the bench and could help you out. So I feel like he's a perfect fit too, because he can play off of Embiid. He can play off of Paul George. He can play off of Maxey. So, but to me, I feel like, you're getting these guys right now, even though you have to go through Embiid, but just in case something doesn't work out, when that time comes to rebuild, or not rebuild, but refocus, so to speak, and you say Maxey's the guy, we got a bunch of guards that we feel like can go with them, because they want to be like Oklahoma City Thunder. They want to be like the Indiana Pacers before, the injuries, whereas you can bring in a couple of guys and they're all interchangeable, and that's what they think. And that's the reason why, they went after who they thought were high character guys who can all feel like, look, it's not a competition. We're going to do this collectively. So that's where they are. They're trying to worry about the here and now, but they want to just make sure that they got their plan B in case, and got the future ready.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The P word for the longest time in Philly was process, and now it looks like it's patience. Patience.
Yeah, isn't that crazy though? It's crazy. Yeah,
it is. Just real quick before we go on, for those of you listening to this show, this is the Big Three NBA podcast, and we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Celtics All Access YouTube channel, where you can find this show and many others related to Boston Celtics content, as well as NBA content, which is what we're talking about today. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so that you can know the instant a new video like this drops. And also, we want to give a quick shout out to our good friends at PrizePicks, which is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. And again, it is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Join millions of users across the globe. You can mix and match your player projections from different sports, whether it's basketball, soccer, esports, you name it, PrizePicks has you covered. They invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out on your lineup, even if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't pan out. How do you get in? It is super, 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 and I do mean super simple. You just download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that is download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay, folks, and we are back with Mr. Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Keith, we're at the portion of the program that I've been waiting to talk to you about from the beginning, and we've touched on it a little bit, but we're just we're gonna cannonball into the conversation right now. Joel Embiid, Paul George, great careers, done a lot of good things, but what can we expect from them at this point? Because it just seems that it feels like we're in this perpetual loop of Charlie Brown and Lucy, where Charlie Brown is running up to the football and ready to knock it out the park, and next thing you know, Lucy yanks the ball up, Charlie's on his back, and we're like, damn, how many times does this have to happen? Sixers fans, I would imagine, feel that way with Joel, and it's probably getting that same vibe with Paul George, that the minute they get their hopes up that, yep, this is it, Paul's out for a stretch, Joel's out for a stretch. What can fans realistically expect out of this version of Paul George and Joel Embiid?
You know what? That's the $1 million question. No one knows. I mean, they don't. I mean, the thing about Joel, Sherrod, I've been covering the Sixers since 2013, 2014, and I've, known you since then, and we've been having this annual conversation about Joel and his injuries, right? You know what I'm saying? We know that his injuries, his conditioning, everything, right? And so here we go again, right? This is the year that, and I know you're talking about the Sixers, but this is the year that where the Boston Celtics, Tatum got hurt, and then the Celtics are reshuffling the roster. So you think that of any year, this is the year that the 76ers are like, look at us, we're going to go for it. It's open. And now the question mark is, like, the reason why no one knows is because, after Joel Embiid came up with that ESPN article, it's like, oh, I'm not coming back until I'm ready. oh, well, people don't know how hard it was and stuff like that. So then you're saying, Daryl Morey beforehand was saying, yeah, we're real confident that Joel's going to be there at the start of the, season. And now we're like, did you talk to Joel about that?
Right.
And then, right, and then, in the same day that he addressed the media, he talked about how Paul George was raring and eager to come back and show everyone. 2 days later, we find out that Paul George had surgery, and they're saying they're going to be cautious with him. So, it's one of those things with Joel. We've been through this for a while. We've seen Joel play at a dominant high level, right? We've seen that, but we also seen his failures in certain games in the playoffs. We've seen that. We witnessed that. My question is, he's getting older now. He played in 19 games last year. He played in 38 games the year before that. He's had 2 left knee surgeries in 14 months, 3 in 9 years. And that doesn't even bring up the eye issues, the other, the stuff that he had to deal with, right? So the question mark is, how much does he have left in the tank? Really, how much does he have left in the tank? And then the big thing is with Paul George is kind of like when you look at Paul George, he's had an extensive injury history too as well. The 1 year that he didn't, recent, was 2 seasons ago. We played in 70 games. Then he gets paid. And then all of a sudden he has more injuries. So it's kind of like he's 35 now. So the biggest question mark is now both guys could come out, and if they play at a high level, the 76ers will be in the mix. But at the same time, we're talking about 2 dudes who are getting older and 2 dudes who have extensive injury histories. And so that's the major problem right now in regards to saying, what can we expect? No one knows. No one does, unfortunately. I mean, you don't even know if they're both going to be playing in the season opener.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy to think about that, because usually when teams have a clear number 1 and number 2, even if the pecking order is a little bit unclear who's 1, who's 2, you still have a certain level of confidence that, come hell or high water, one of these cats is going to be around for us to lean on. And you just go down the rosters of NBA teams, and that's literally the case damn near every team except Philly. And it gets back to, I think, something you touched on a bit earlier, and that is roster construction, which is a job of Daryl Morey. I think most people, are smart enough basketball fans to know that the salary cap has this impact on the type of talent you can put together, things like that. But when people start looking at other NBA teams and seeing how when their franchise player goes down, they figure out a way to add the right kind of player, or at least someone that you can justify in your mind makes sense. Adding Paul George makes even less sense when you look at his track record of injuries. That was clearly the thing that for the average fan, you're wondering, how is this going to work? So my question to you really is has more to do with Daryl Morey and just how much criticism, heat, pressure, focus, attention, whatever you want to call it, is he getting for the way that he is constructed this roster? And to your point earlier, are they trying to sell what they're doing as a refocus versus a rebuild? Because I don't know if your fan base can take another damn rebuild at this point.
No, they can't. And that's a great question, man. You coming up with all the great questions today. Man, the kids, you're doing a good job, bro. But look, here's the thing. I'm gonna say this, and this is long with it. There was 2 times where I felt like the Sixers really messed up in regards to rebuilding the team, right? And nothing against Al Horford or anything like that. And I felt like Al caught some strays when he came here because they didn't utilize him the right way. Great player who wasn't utilized the right way. But when they broke up that team of Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler, JJ Redick, and Ben Simmons, and then they had some other guys coming off the bench, right? We're talking about, and I'm talking about this, TJ McConnell, all those guys. They broke that team up. To me, that was crazy because they said they were bringing everybody back. They didn't. They broke them up. Then this thing, finally, when I felt like they finally put it together, is, okay, they trade James Harden. Everybody says, okay, you trade James Harden, and you got these guys from the Clippers, right? You had Pat Bev on a minimum, and people are saying to themselves, they're like, yeah, but how good are these guys? Well, they all had like that mentality that you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Like Marcus Morris, a North Philly cat, right?
Yeah.
He didn't care about getting shots. He knew, he was saying it's easy to play off of Embiid. And like I know, in the past, when they used to go to Boston, they would try to get in Embiid's head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Man, now you got Marcus Morris, you got Pat Bev. They starting fights with the brothers in Detroit, trying to get them. Nobody want to fight them, but they up there, and the dudes from Detroit respected them, right?
Yep.
So they're up there balling, and I get it. Joel got hurt. He got hurt. But then all of a sudden, because you were in this, you wanted to acquire assets, even though all these guys were on 1-year deals, you trade Marcus Morris. You get rid of Pat Bev, right? You got rid of all these people who were gritty, grimy fellas, and then you bring in shooters and you bring in these other point guards. Like, everybody want to dance and all this other stuff. That wasn't what Philly was about. So now you look at it and you say to yourself, it's like, the thing that the Sixers have a habit of doing is, okay, we need some gritty, grimy dudes. Oh, no, that ain't working. We got to get shooters. So then you go bring in the shooters and but they're not gritty and grimy. So then all of a sudden we got to go back and get gritty, grimy again. So to me, the 76ers really messed up, man, when they got rid of those people, because they were better before the trade deadline, not this past season, but the year before that, than they ever been. They've been on the decline since then. They didn't have any more toughness. And think about it. Mook could knock down an open shot.
Yeah,
some other guys who could do that. Yeah, so and like you look at it and you have to blame him. Another thing that Daryl Morey is getting destroyed for in Philly is, when you look at it, the Paul George thing has to really work out. And it may work out. But when you look at it and you say to yourself, you gave this guy $211.5 million, and you were the only team in free agency who were willing to give him that 4th year. No one else did, right? So if it doesn't work out, that's a bad look. The other bad look is when you gave Embiid an extension 3 years, 2 years before it was up. His time was up. And so now you look at it, you have, 2 guys who, crazy part is Embiid's extension doesn't even kick in until not this upcoming season, the season after that. So so when you look at it, you say to yourself, you're like, really, dude? Like, really? And I'm not mad at Embiid for taking it. Like
right.
You got to know when you're going to give me an extension now?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So when you think of that, yeah, Daryl Morey he's going to catch a lot of, he is catching, or he is being criticized and being blamed a lot for the mishaps because, of who he brought in, and they don't have any roster flexibility. And everyone keeps bringing up all the injuries that Paul George had beforehand. They're bringing up all the injuries that Joel had. And then there's also the lack of transparency, that they feel like Daryl Morey and the Sixers are guilty of. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
And ultimately, it comes back to wins and losses. And Philly, obviously, when you start looking at their team, if they're fully healthy on paper, it's nothing to sneeze about. When you look at Maxey, Joel, Paul George, you got the young fella Edgecombe, McCain's coming back. What do you see this Sixers team realistically finishing in the East? I mean, are we talking top third? Are we talking playoffs? Are we talking play-in? Are we talking playoff? What do you see them ultimately shaking down in the East this year, which, as you pointed out accurately, is incredibly wide open for damn near any and every team?
I think if Joel Embiid comes back and plays at an extremely high level, like towards his MVP level when he was that and can stay healthy, I think they can be a top 4 team in the East, regular season wide. I think so. I just the bad matchups for him will most likely be Cleveland, maybe Orlando a little bit, Detroit, this and that. But I do think that, and I'm talking about from the way these guys play them, these young boys and stuff like that.
Right.
But at the same time, I do think that they could be a top 4 team. If he's not healthy, I think they're going to struggle, man. I do. I think I look at certain things where the over/under is anywhere from 43 to 41 wins, depending on who you go to in Vegas. Who you think has the best odds. I just look at it and I just see a team that's older. Now, again, they do have some young guys, but there's not a lot of in between. If you know what I'm saying, you either got some young dudes and you got old dudes. And the problem is, as much as, and people in Philly get upset when you say this, but I think that Maxey needs a help with a traditional point guard at times, where you can take him off the ball, get him in some space. You see how we all know how quick he is, but at the same time, if Joel Embiid is hurt, if PG isn't up to snuff, it's going to be a little bit easier to defend him. But if you have somebody else who can be a solid ball handler, then I think that frees Maxey up for big games. If not, he has to worry too much about being a facilitator, doing a lot of other things. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely going to be very interesting to see how things play out with Philly, because no one really has a feel, and to some extent, every team is like that. But there seems to be an even wilder wild card dynamic to who they are because of health concerns, because of fit, because of just the way the roster is constructed. And folks, Keith Pompey will be all over that this year for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Before we get out of here, Keith, for those of you listening to this show, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast and leave a review, like and love it, and all that good stuff. And for those watching it on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe to the CLNS Media and Celtics All Access YouTube channel, where you can get this show and many other great ones, all centered around Celtics content, or the NBA for that matter. And please make sure to turn on those notifications so that you know the instant a new video drops. And again, Keith, appreciate you coming on, man. This is always a pleasure to have you, my friend. Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Keith, let them know where they can find your work at, my man.
Yeah, you can find my work at inquirer.com. You can also find me on Twitter, or X now, at Pompey on Sixers, on Blue Sky at Pompey on Sixers. The same thing for Instagram and Threads. So yeah, Pompey on Sixers.
And he does a great job covering the Sixers. Evident about the hardware that the brother has been able to haul in while covering the Sixers. And again, this is the Big Three podcast for Keith Pompey. I'm Sherrod Blakely. We are out.